Clara from the Old Quad Resident Association, and tonight we're hosting a candidate forum, and so that way we can get to know our candidates. I think it's really important to be active in our city of Santa Clara and to know who's running for things and to get your questions answered and to be an active member of our community.
Hello, Ken.
All right, I want to thank everybody for coming. My name is Adam Thompson. I'm the president of the Old Quad Residents Association, and we are co-hosting this candidate forum with our good friends, Mission City Credit Union, that's just down the way. They're very gracious to help us out with securing the facility to host this so we can accommodate as many people comfortably as possible. I want to remind everybody, the rules have been passed out to the candidates ahead of time. They've read them all. I just want to remind everybody in the audience, please be respectful, no heckling, call-outs, anything like that. We are taking questions on cards. Feel free to put your question down and we'll be vetted. And then if we have time at the end of each round of clerk and mayor, we'll ask the audience questions at the end. And then also, please, silence your cell phones at this point. So we'll get started. So the way this is going to work is the candidates drew numbers. They're going to go in order. They're going to have 2 minutes for an opening statement. They're going to get to talk about why they want to be, whatever they want, about themselves as well. And then we'll start with 1 minute round of questions, and then we'll do a closing statement. So I guess Roseanne's not here, so Tom, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having us all here. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone to see so many candidates for city clerk, and I think it's fantastic. I think with the way things are going right now, the idea of more people getting involved in politics is exactly the direction we want to see in our city. So I think it's fantastic that you get to choose between a number of people on who you want to basically be the city clerk for the city. I think that's great. I went ahead and decided that I wanted to run for city clerk because I wanted to basically make a difference. I wanted to basically see what I could bring to the city clerk position. Now, since between the time I filed and now, council actually has changed the meaning of what a city clerk is. And I looked at that and said, you know what? This is okay because I can still help and make a difference. City clerk is in charge of, or main duty right now is in charge of our elections. And I feel that, nothing is more important to a democracy than the way our elections are conducted. And what's going to happen with the districts that we are now basically been forced upon us by this judgment, I think it's even more crucial that we do outreach with these elections. Make sure that people understand how they can run for office. Not just making sure that what they're doing is proper for the election, but make sure that people can go and actually say, well, I'm interested in running for this, and basically making sure they understand about the districts and the council and how all this is put together. So, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for putting up with all 5 of us up here. Thank you.
Mr. Khag.
Hi everybody, my name is Hassan Hagag. Probably many of you already know me from living in the Old Quad, but also live streaming a lot of the videos and city meetings that we all care to follow with our city council. The way I see the role of the city clerk is 2 roles. The first role is that the role of the watchdog on behalf of the people. And Santa Clara is not the only city in California, but it's one of the few cities in California that actually elect their city clerk, which is unique because the city clerk then doesn't have to answer to the council or the mayor or to the city manager, they answer to the people. And when they answer to the people, they do the people's work and they serve as a watchdog. Our city clerk has to enforce the new dark money ordinance, they have to enforce the lobbyist ordinance, and they are the keeper of the record. The other role that I see of the city clerk is that of the chief democracy officer. the person in the city who actually will work hard to bring everybody together. They don't have a vote on council, but their job really is to bring everybody together on the issues that the city and the residents care about. And I've already been doing that for the last 5 years. Those of you who have followed me on Facebook, I have now over 900 followers on my Facebook for all the city issues that we do. And with the videos that I've been doing, I pioneered live streaming of city videos on social media for all the residents to watch. And my videos right now have over 125,000 views over the last 2 years alone. Those are views that each and every one of you have watched. And by having that access, that open access to City Hall, transparency becomes the norm. And when you get transparency, then you don't get any shenanigans. It helps to build trust among the community, and that's what I want to bring as your next city clerk. Part of my platform of city clerk is to host a town hall once a month for all the residents on the issues that you care about, that you're going to vote about. I know you're going to hear a lot more about what my positions are on the issues tonight, and I hope by the end of the night that I would have earned your vote. My name is Hassan Hagag, and I'm running for city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agag. Mr. Stampolis?
Great. Hi, good evening all. I'm Chris Stampolis, and also glad to be up here as one of the candidates for city clerk. From a perspective of here with the Old Quad Residents Association hosting us tonight, what I want to share is that I'm a graduate from Santa Clara University. I grew up in Los Angeles many years ago, but I've been here now in the city for, I can't believe it's actually almost 35 years, so all of my adult life. And I think the issues that are of very significant importance here to this portion of town, I understand very deeply. Not just living here way many years ago when I was a student, but then somebody throughout my young adult years and as a young dad, I understand and have been involved in the whole issue of what happens when university students, unfortunately, are less than respectable and responsible in having their impact on our local neighborhoods. When I served on the Historical and Landmarks Commission, I was one of your appointed officials years ago to participate in that university neighborhood discussion process that occurred. As your city clerk, I will ensure that we continue to implement that and we strengthen it. And I will have the credibility to be able to work with the university as a former member of the Alumni Association and as an alumnus, as well as with the community, so that we have a place to deal with those issues and then also be able to help to make some recommendations to the council so things can get better. As Hassan mentioned, part of our job is to include the community in ongoing discussion. And it's not just about having a monthly town hall, which I also think is a wonderful idea and which I support, but it's actually getting a little bit even more neighborhood focused, because the issues in the Old Quad Association are different from those from North Side, they're different from those on the other side of San Tomas. And so what we really need to be doing is ensuring that we're publicizing what the existing groups already are doing. I look forward to the discussion tonight on Chris Stampolis. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Heather Roberts.
Thank you. Do you mind if I stand? I'm a little bit hidden here behind the table. Hello to everyone. Thank you for coming out on a Thursday night. I'm very privileged to be here. I'm very privileged to be running for city clerk. You may notice from my accent that I'm not from around here. I'm from Australia, as you might have guessed. I've been in Santa Clara for 18 years. My family came here when my young girl was only 6 months old, and she's 18 and going off to college on Saturday. So we've certainly seen a lot of Santa Clara and lived through Santa Clara and lived through some of the issues. So you might be wondering why I'm running for city clerk. Throughout my time here in Santa Clara, I've been involved in leadership, mostly through school and community events. This role of city clerk, I couldn't agree with Tom anymore, that democracy is really very important. And the role of city clerk to run the elections is a very important role to ensure that democracy carries on and is seen to be even and fair for everyone who decides to come out for city clerk. And that's all I'd like to say tonight as my intro. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bob O'Keefe.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I'd like to thank the Old Quad. I'd like to thank the Credit Union for hosting this forum and for the American Legion for the use of the hall. My name is Bob O'Keefe. I was born and raised in Santa Clara. I went to grammar school right across the street of St. Clair's. I I used to play in this parking lot, and I used to play in the old downtown, and it's still there. I've been a member of this community for many years, obviously. I've recently retired from the California Highway Patrol with over 30 years of service. During that time, I was officer, sergeant, lieutenant, and hopefully in command of patrol operations in San Francisco and San Mateo counties. My wife Lori and I live in the Old Quad on Alviso Street down from the university. We love Santa Clara. We're staying here. We're not going anywhere. I have vast government administrative experience. The reason why I am running for city clerk, I think it's imperative that we maintain the elected city clerk, the elected city chief of police. The redistricting for council members is going to work itself out, and that we continue the at-large for the mayor. The city clerk, I believe, is one of the most important. It's the records keeper and the elections officer. The duties now have been reduced for the elected city clerk to that of the elections officer, but also the keeper of the seal. And it's funny, I've asked people, what is the keeper of the seal? And nobody seems to answer that question at the city. It is a very important duty. It is, when any legal document is authenticated by the city, it has to have the city seal to it. There is a seal. It's locked up in the vault at the city clerk's office, and the only one that can affix that seal to authenticate a document is the city clerk. I look forward to answering your questions tonight. My name is Bob O'Keefe, and I hope I'll be able to earn your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you all the candidates for coming and participating in this forum. We'll start with the questions now. We'll start in order. You guys all drew. So Mr. McDevitt, you're up first. First question of this evening is, what is the most important quality of a city clerk?
Let me answer, what is the most important quality of the city clerk of Santa Clara? Because city clerks change from city to city as to what their duties are. I think the most important quality of our city clerk here is going to be making sure that administering the rules of election, because without that, there could be just utter chaos. There are many, many forms and timetables that are needed in order to run for election and make sure that everything is done properly. Right now, that information is very hard to get. Our website is kind of in a shambles when it comes to elections and people wanting to run for elections. And so getting that information out to potential candidates and also therefore to voters, I think is very important. So basically, we need to make sure that rules are followed and that communication on those rules are basically presented to people who need them.
Thank you. Mr. Agag, what is the most important quality of a city clerk?
I think the city clerk really, as I spoke in my opening, is the chief democracy officer. And part of that role is we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And the city clerk really needs to listen to the people. The council must as well. The council has a vote on everything that goes through, through City Hall. But the city clerk, as an elected official, is there to facilitate civic engagement. And more than just to be the voice of the people, but to be the conduit for the voice of the people, to help enable the people to be able to communicate to the rest of City Hall, to the council and mayor. And we hear about how the city clerk, they have to maintain the minutes. They're the keeper of the minutes. But also we hear about how agendas are posted super late. We need to get ahead of time, ahead of the agenda, to get those early. And the clerk's office does that. And most importantly, the clerk needs to keep a pulse on the community and let the council know when the community has issues and to bring those issues to the forefront. And I think that is the most important role that the city clerk can play, and I can play that.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis, what is the most important quality of a city clerk?
Effectiveness. Effectiveness with regard to transparency, effectiveness with regard to accessibility, effectiveness with regard to outreach. It's one thing to simply just have fresh new ideas, and that's a wonderful thing that I hope every candidate up here is bringing to the debate. But when a person steps into that role of city clerk, what I think that new city clerk needs to be able to do is to know immediately where to go to get the community groups connected, to begin that communication process, and to set some specific goals that the city clerk's office, with regard to elections as with regard to communication, can achieve in a step-by-step basis. Just simply even with regard to voter registration and voter turnout alone, that's a clearly data-based type of statistic that can be followed in terms of number of voters who are registered, how we're doing with our young people who are registered, and then not just registered, but actually turning out to vote. It's about effectiveness.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, what is the most important quality of a city clerk?
Thanks for the question. Two of the most important qualities of a city clerk would have to be ethics and to be ethical, and secondly, to have good administratorship. The office of the clerk is one where at the end of 2 years, the city clerk then has to help other nominees who want to be city clerk to give them that information. This person for city clerk needs to be ethical. They need to know what's right and what's wrong. They need to be able to differentiate that. I've had 10 years in government experience, and I think that helps me in terms of being able to do the job. As an administrator, someone has to be in that position who knows exactly how things work. And I think that's going to be a big strength of mine in defining this leadership position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, what is the most important quality of a city clerk?
Since you said quality, I would consider professionalism, and that casts a wide net. I would include honesty, high ethical and high moral standards, effectiveness, as Chris said, honesty, integrity, everything that makes up a core individual. I know that that's a successful qualities to have. Those qualities are instilled in me, and those qualities I will use if I'm elected city clerk.
Thank you. All right, question number 2 will go to Mr. Haggad first. What will be the top 3 priorities for you if you are elected city clerk?
So the top 3 that I want to talk about real quickly here in 1 minute is, with the city clerk being the watchdog, they have to enforce the lobbyist ordinance. We have already failed to enforce the lobbyist ordinance in our city today. Okay, more than one instance has happened where we failed to enforce the lobbyist ordinance. We have to enforce the dark money ordinance. So we have to keep the city clean of any influence and take out any dirty money that's happening in our city. That's number 1. The second one is, when it comes to transparency, is getting and continuing to build upon what I already pioneered in the city with live streaming our city meetings. We need to do that with all of the meetings, the committee meetings, the commission meetings. We need to bring the city to the people, not expect that people are going to come to 7 p.m. council meetings that last until 2 a.m. We have to bring the city to the people and not expect that they would come to the city. That's how you build transparency and trust. And then the last one, like I said, is giving the residents a chance and a voice by holding monthly town halls on the issues that they care about. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis, what will be the 3 top priorities for you if you are elected city clerk?
Communication with the public about city issues and working with existing neighborhood organizations to publicize their gatherings and to ensure that information is shared directly with them. Looking at voter registration and voter turnout, developing partnerships with our schools and with our community groups so that we're able to increase the turnout as well as with voter registration. And transparency. So transparency meaning to ensure that our website is kept up to date, that the existing ordinances are well publicized out to the community, and maintaining ongoing communication with each council member, both as individuals as well as with the council as a whole. So as the council sets policy, that policy can be communicated out to the public. It's never going to be the job of the city clerk to set policy, but it will be the job of the city clerk to make sure that it's communicated very clearly in as many different ways as it needs to be in our very diverse community.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, what will be your top 3 priorities if you are elected city clerk?
My top 3 priorities would relate to the election part of the job of the city clerk. The first one is making sure voter registration is up to date, that enough has been done to make sure that people actually register to vote. The second part would be making sure I know all the laws and ordinances relating to the administration of the position of the making sure elections are supported properly. They're the 2 biggest priorities that I would give if I was elected city clerk. I already know the city seal is very safely tucked away in a safe, so I'm pretty sure that it's well looked after. And my third priority would be making sure that people know about Santa Clara, that we talk about Santa Clara and reach out to people to make sure that our stories are told. I'm a personal historian, and this is what is important to us as a community, to be able to share our stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, what will be your top 3 priorities if you are elected city clerk?
The role of the city clerk is in what I call transition period. My first priority would be to define my responsibilities as city clerk, the assistant city clerk's responsibilities, and the rest of the staff of the city clerk's office. Once we understand what we individually do, we can work cooperatively with the city manager's office, city attorney, city council, and mayor, and administer the city clerk's office. Second, my priorities would be transparency. Once we have all that information, putting it out there so the public will know what is available from the city clerk's office. Third would be accountability and accessibility. I believe that the public has the right to contact a public official, me as a city clerk, and I need to find a way to have that happen. I would ask that there would be some sort of monthly town hall meeting or access at a city council meeting that the city clerk, myself, and the assistant city clerk could take questions from the public. So those would be my 3 top priorities, but there's many more.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, what will be your 3 top priorities if you are elected city clerk?
I'd like to say, first of all, these questions are great. They're really on topic. We've all been to various forums and interviewed for people, and a lot of times the questions vary because they don't, city clerk being elected is an unusual thing, right? And so sometimes people stray into things that aren't related to the city clerk when they ask me questions about what I would do. City clerk is really about elections, and that's what my priorities would be. First of all, the very first priority, almost to get a good glass of water, but what I need to do is make sure that our website is correct. We are giving out erroneous information, and our information is very late. There's no reason why we don't have a section on our website that basically says how to run, here are important dates, here's the next date for the next election cycle. These are all known. We should have this information out there. As far as holding town hall meetings, I think that's a good idea. I'm basically planning on having hourly meeting times, like office hours for people to come in Saturday time.
Thank you. All right, for our 3rd question, Mr. Stampolis, if you already have a full-time or part-time job, how will you manage the demands of city clerk? And the second part is, do you plan on holding office hours? And if so, what might they look like?
So I think we'll take the second half first if I could. In terms of office hours, absolutely. And I think that those will be staggered over a period of a month. So although there probably will be one particular day where I'll have regular office hours that'll just be open, where I'll clear off my schedule to be available on those days, I'll look at doing kind of an ongoing monthly cycle where that'll be out there on a regular monthly basis. In terms of the rest of the accessibility, part of the role of the city clerk is not just simply to be in the office, but to be out in the community. And it is a very unique position because we have the opportunity to somewhat make of this job what it is that we choose to. And being out in the community is one that I believe is going to be the challenge for this clerk, to not just be listening, but also to be ensured that we're the ones who can start to connect the various groups of Santa Clara together. So I think that in general answers your question. I will be a very active city clerk. I'll be out there. I'll be available. And whether it's through text or through phone or in person, I'll be there.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, if you already have a full-time or part-time job, how will you manage the demands of being city clerk? And do you plan on holding office hours? If so, what might they look like?
Okay, so thanks very much for the question. I have a fairly flexible job, so I imagine that my hours at City Hall would be quite flexible. There'd be a lot of demand, especially leading up to elections, so from August through November, and coming, I don't think we have April elections, but if we did, it would be around those April elections as well. So that's where most of the demand at the time would be. I'd make sure that I would have at least 1 day per week in the office. But I think the Office of the City Clerk, taking a broader approach, I'd be working with the Assistant City Clerk and the other people in that office to make sure that all queries and questions are answered. So it's also a question about management style and being a good administrator. Being accessible by phone or by email is also very important. So I'd definitely make myself available for anyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, if you already have a full-time or part-time job, how will you manage the demands of being city clerk? Do you plan on holding office hours? If so, what might they look like?
I am happy to say that I'm happily retired. After 30 years of public service on the California Highway Patrol, that was dedicated to public service. Before this election started, even thought about it, I spoke to my wife. We had long discussions about if I want to do this, how I want to do it, and the commitment it would take. We were both united. Our girls are growing out of the house. So I have plenty of time to dedicate this. I would hold office hours. It would be minimum 2 days a week, probably 1 day in the mornings, 1 day in the afternoons. That would end during election season. It could be up to 5 days a week. I think that I need to be accessible, and I need to be the one, if I'm the elections official, speaking to the candidates, taking the information. I would work closely with the assistant city manager and the staff, and the management style I have has been inclusive of everybody, but I will be there, not underfoot, but I will be there to work.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, if you already have a full or part-time job, how will you manage the demands of being the city clerk? Do you plan on holding office hours? If so, what might they look like?
I am a full-time employee. I'm employed in the software development field as a QA manager. I've talked to my employer about this, and they said they would be happy to work with me with whatever I needed to do. So I have basically the flexibility to accommodate whatever I need in order to get this position done correctly. I already said earlier about that I wanted to hold office hours. What would they look like? Well, I think office hours to me are always a little annoying when they're only 8 to 5. So I would make sure that at least 1 day a week there would be a late session, maybe something that went to, let's say, 7 o'clock. Maybe probably on the council meeting days, Tuesday, right? So that's something I would do.
All right, thank you. Mr. Agag, if you already have a full or part-time job, how will you manage the demands of being city clerk? Do you plan on holding office hours? If so, what might they look like?
I actually have 3 full-time jobs. I work in the tech sector as a full-time. I'm a full-time dad of 3 beautiful daughters, one who's just 8 months old right now. And my 3rd full-time job is serving you all already. And I've been doing that already for the last 3 years, showing up to nearly every single city council meeting in the last 2.5 years, live streaming it, voicing your concerns. And I, out of all of the candidates here, am the most accessible out of all of you because we have long conversations and chats on the Facebook feeds and the videos and the posts that I make. And I would continue that and expand it through the official capacity of the clerk's office. How can we reach the people? How can we engage and all talk together as a community and use the tools and technology available to us to communicate without having to physically be together in person, although being together physically in person is wonderful and I always love it. And the final thing that I want to say is, as far as office hours go, it has to be accessible not just to those who can make it during the day who are retired, but it has to work for people who are working full-time jobs and maybe even 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet in this very expensive valley. And I would make sure that my office hours are accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we jump to the next question, I just want to remind everybody out in the audience that we are taking questions. And Jonathan or Judy, if you want to hand them to them, they'll go ahead and vet them out and then hand them to me once we're done. All right. So Ms. Roberts, is there anything you would like to change about the city's electoral process?
my first time running for office for the city, and in fact running for an elected office in this country. I found that the city office was, the acting city clerk did a great job of being able to give me proper information about the election process. And as a good administrator, I would like to make sure that I work with the public to iron out any difficulties that people saw. So personally, I don't see many problems that I'd like to change. Sorry, I haven't identified problems I'd like to change. But that doesn't mean there aren't some. And that doesn't mean the city clerk ignores them. The city clerk, as the main election officer, needs to be able to address those issues and work with people to iron out those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, is there anything you would like to change about the city's electoral process?
Thank you, that's a great question. I want to answer that two ways. I'm going to put on my city clerk hat first and say, as the elected city clerk, I would have no opinion on if I wanted to change any electoral process. I, as election official, would have to follow the law and what's in the charter about the current electoral process. So I would not have an opinion, but I would follow the law and enforce the current electoral process that's in the charter, which can only be changed by a vote of the people, or, as we saw in redistricting, by a legal order of the court. On taking that hat off and being a citizen, I would have to say no. 80% no. We will have to work with some sort of redistricting, but I think it's imperative that we maintain the elected chief of police, the elected mayor, and the elected city clerk citywide. You should not take away democracy, you should add to democracy. So we need to maintain those positions as elected positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, is there anything you would like to change about the city's electoral process?
Yes, there is. One thing that maybe people understand, but it takes a lot of money to get elected. But that money is really used for outreach, and it's used for marketing materials so that people can know who you are and what your platform is. One of the best ways to do that is the ballot statements that are mailed out to everyone. One of the problems is those ballot statements, it costs $2,600 in order to basically put that paragraph statement out there to the voters. And two of us that are running for city clerk decided not to spend that money. I personally felt that I would rather donate that money to charity than it was to try and get myself elected as city clerk. And so I decided that was a decision I made. Basically, with the candidates that are running for this election, it would have cost the city approximately $50,000 to cover the entire cost of the ballot. And really, how can we put a price on getting people enfranchised and able to express their opinion and basically get their chance to be voted on? And so that's something I would definitely change, was to basically make it more accessible for people to come and try and run for an elections without having to spend so much money, which could be spent so many different ways to help other people.
Thank you. Mr. Haggard, is there anything you would like to change about the city's electoral process?
Where were you 2 years ago? So I served 2 terms, spent 2 years in addition to going to all the city meetings and live streaming and everything. I spent 2 terms, served 2 terms on the Charter Review Committee, and we discussed ad nauseum how to change elections in Santa Clara and make it more accessible to people. And how do we look at ways to change the seat system, the old seat system that we had, to make it more fair, more open for anybody to run, people with new ideas, people who don't have connections, get everybody involved. And regardless of how you voted on Measure A, I personally, despite, if I win, and hopefully I will, I would be the first ethnic minority in any elected position in Santa Clara, but I don't believe that people vote based on the color of your skin or your ethnicity. I believe people vote based on your qualifications. And I will say that as an ethnic minority. But regardless of how you voted on Measure A, I don't think the system that we ended up with is the best system that we have for Santa Clara. And I fought on the Charter Review Committee to keep our chief of police and our city clerk as elected positions, because we should be empowering people with more democracy and not taking it away from them.
Thank you. Mr. Simpolis, is there anything you would like to change about the city's electoral process?
Sure. I also have experience having served on the Charter Review Committee, a version prior to when Assam served on it. and also have 12 years of elected experience as well as 13 years of appointed experience here in the city. So with that cumulative about 25 years of public service having served you, I'd say a couple of very quick things, yes. With regard to the ballot statement, we easily could have the council adopt a policy that would say that when you decide to file for office, your opportunity to post a ballot statement online for free would be something offered. You would pay the half, right now the city picks up half the cost, you continue to pay half the cost to have it printed, but no reason we couldn't put it up online automatically for free. With regard to the district ballot statements, I think it's unfortunate that we did not anticipate the decision that the judge made, because the candidates for the districts right now are paying the same amount for their printed ballot statement as those of us who are running citywide. So I would be advocating that the cost of the district statement should be proportionate. And those are proposals I can make to the city council. I've been an elected official, I know how to put it together, and we can get a majority to get that change made. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, for the next question, it's going to be Mr. O'Keefe. What would you do to help ensure the process goes smoothly with the new district elections?
First of all, the process goes smoothly. Again, we're in a transition phase. We don't know how the process is going to go, but I, as elected city clerk, will work hard to ensure whatever process we have, and none of us will have influence until maybe the June 2020 election if there's a ballot measure on the statement, but then the election there. But we'll have plenty of time to work with the city council, to work with the city attorney's office, to work with the city manager, to come up with a plan, if it's districting, to get that out to the public first and get much more public input than we had on this last one. I felt that this was kind of thrown at us. Yeah, there's an appeal, but we can start working right now for 2020, and that's what I'll do starting my first day in office as the elections official.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, what would you do to help ensure the process goes smoothly with the new district elections?
One thing I would do would be to send a letter to every house and let them know what district they are currently in. Basically, we have 6 districts now, and it could be confusing on the part of what side of the street you're on, as whether you're in District 4 or in District 5. And so I think basically sending a letter out to everyone, telling them where they're at. I think also including additional information in our quarterly city publications would be good. Maybe even put a map in our city calendar. These are all just information that people need to know what district am I in. And I think we need to plan on there being districts of some form coming forward. So, I think at-large elections would be best, but we need to plan for these districts, because right now this election cycle is kind of a turmoil for the candidates that are running for city council, and I feel for them.
Thank you. Mr. Haggad, what will you do to help ensure the process goes smoothly with the new district elections?
So the interesting thing is I was just in this last weekend at the Art and Wine Festival, and I had a booth there talking to people about my candidacy. And every time that somebody would walk by, I would say, hey, do you live in Santa Clara? And if they said yes, then I talked to them and give them a flyer and asked them to vote for me. And I was very, I don't want to say amusing to watch. Some of the council candidates, every time somebody would walk by, they said, hey, do you live in Santa Clara? They say, yes. Yeah. You live in this district? And the person was like, wait, there's districts now in the city? So the first thing that I would do is to educate people. We really got to educate people. People in Santa Clara, our residents in Santa Clara have no idea, beyond the people in this room, and maybe a few more, that we even moved to districts. And when they find out, they get really frustrated and upset, because they're saying, I could vote for 6 people before on council, 7 people if you include the mayor, and now I can only vote for 2. So I think education is number one. The second thing is, of course, the city has appealed that decision. We'll see where that goes, obviously, in the courts. But we need to engage people. And when we engage people, and that's what I want to do in the city clerk's office, to engage people and make them more involved and make them care about their city, you're going to find some amazing new candidates, faces that we've never seen before, names that we've never heard of, step up to the plate and throw their name in for city council, and we need those new ideas and those new people engaged in our city.
Thank you. Mr. Stampoulos, what would you do to help ensure the process goes smoothly with the new district elections?
It starts with folks volunteering to apply for elected boards and commissions. It's generally you become a better elected official when you've had some experience already serving on some type of either county or city board. So one of the first things we need to be doing is reaching out, even more than we have, to ensure that we're getting more applications, more diverse folks who are applying for the various vacancies that we have. Secondly, there should be absolutely no question that there would be a televised forum, and it shouldn't just be one. The fact that this cycle there was not even a certainty as to whether there would be televised candidate forum, that doesn't look very good on us as a city, because this had nothing to do with whether or not there was going to be districts or it was going to be at large. So as city clerk, I would certainly be advocating and working with both the city manager as well as with the city council to plan already for 2 years out so that we have our scheduled candidate forums, those that are televised and those that are not. And finally, and I do agree with Tom, and I would have said the same thing, we do need to communicate out with the community. Those folks who live in portions of the city that will have district elections in 2 years, they need to know as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, what would you do to help ensure the process goes smoothly with the new district elections?
Mr. O'Keefe is right, we are in transition. But when we're in transition, we can learn from our mistakes. I'm very much a data-driven person, so I would look at the way the election went this cycle around, so we can learn from it and figure out what we could do better for the next cycle. Education is going to be very important, making sure that people do know what districts they live in, making sure they know who to vote for, making sure they know how to enrol to vote. I think that's a very important part of the role of the city clerk. The office of the city clerk involves more than just the city clerk. There's the assistant city clerk. The city has got resources for the city clerk to use, such as the attorney. And I think the involvement of those people and those positions with the city clerk to sort out exactly how to transition next time around will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll start back with Mr. McDevitt. These will be questions from the audience. If you have any other questions, anybody has anything, Jonathan or Judy will take them and hand them off to me. Our previous city clerk was highly educated in this field. What is your educational background that qualifies you for this position? How will you reach people that have no computers?
I have probably the most eclectic educational background of anybody up here. I basically have my AA degree, my BA degree, my master's degree. I went and I basically did student teaching at Peterson Elementary, at Monte Vista High School. I have, the joke this year was no more classes. I'm not going to take another college class. I need to stop. So I have basically AA in history, BA in history, MA in education. I know how to basically present information to people in lecture and other formats. How do we get people without computers? I think my other idea of basically sending letters to people's homes is the right way to do that. There are people, even in Silicon Valley, that don't have access to computers.
Thank you. Mr. Agag, our previous city clerk was highly educated in this field. What is your educational background that qualifies you for this position, and how will you reach people that have no computers?
So it's really interesting because with the way, just in the last few months, the city council reassigned a lot of the duties of the city clerk to the assistant city clerk. And we have a fantastic staff in the city clerk's office right now, many of whom have official certifications. And I think by doing that in the elected role, which is, the roles have been shifted, my role will be to go out to the community, and I've proven that I can do that. I don't need a degree to show that I can reach out people and engage people and bring people together to the table to talk about their ideas and their issues and their concerns. When you talk about reaching people without technology, I think that's maybe a personal jab at me because I've talked about my way of how I can reach people, and you'd be surprised to know that the most people, the highest demographic of people who watch my videos are women aged 40 to 60. So it's not to say that people can't reach, technology. I think it's there, but we should empower them more with, access in the libraries, access to the senior center, access at City Hall, which doesn't have that today. And it's really, really depressing to see that some of the ways that the city still reaches people is by posting notices on telephone poles, within a 500-foot radius. Why can't we at least call people, send them text messages? So we need to use all of our tools at our disposal.
Thank you.
What I wrote down here and I just circled was text messaging. So I'm glad you mentioned it, but what I want to focus on here is that it's not just about having your computer within your home. There's plenty of places to go get access to a computer if that's what you want. But in terms of the city being able to communicate, there's lots of ways to opt in to a whole different bastion of text messaging that can go out. It's interesting what one of the other, what colleague here, Hassan, mentioned with regard to the posting on the polls, because that's something that does need to continue. This is about both and, it's not about either or. And so the job of the city clerk's office is to ensure that we're finding more and more ways to communicate. That means working with the faith communities, it means working with local community organizations, neighborhood groups, ensuring that there's a two-way dialogue. But in the very short, simple message, you can also be including recorded messages, again, on an opt-in basis, so that people who want to be able to get information can get that either by text, by robocall, or occasionally even by the hard copy mail.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts, our previous city clerk was highly educated in this field. What is your educational background that qualifies you for this position? How will you reach people that have no computers?
Sure, thanks for the question. I might vie with Tom for the most eclectic background here. So I have a science background. I also have a graduate diploma in public policy that I studied for in Australia. The systems of government are very similar. I've also got a graduate diploma in legal studies. I've also got a graduate diploma in IT. As well as that, I completed my MBA at UTS in Sydney. So that's my background. I've spent almost 10 years in government. I was a performance auditor for 5 years with the Australian National Audit Office. That reported directly to Parliament. I also worked for the Attorney General's Department in the consumer food area, looking at consumer labelling and laws. I also worked for a new legislative assembly, setting up a new legislative assembly, and that was just a lot of fun. I've also worked in the Australian Senate and had a lot of experience there. And what would I do to reach people? You know, the city's got a great quarterly newsletter, and there's a lot of information that goes out with that newsletter, and I'd be piggybacking on the writing part of that newsletter to let people know what's going on.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe, our previous city clerk was highly educated in this field. What is your educational background that qualifies you for this position? How will you reach people that have no computers?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what Mr. Deardon Jr.'s education background is. One thing I do know, he lives around the corner from me, and I've talked to him frequently, is in the last 105 years, we've had 4 city clerks in the city of Santa Clara. Rod Deardon Jr., Judy Bacciaganoni, Austin Steve Bielek, and some person in 1913 named A.J. Cronin. I don't know what their educational backgrounds are either. The one thing that Rod kept pushing is this Master Municipal Clerk Certificate. You can't get that until you're a city clerk. I will look at every training opportunity I have if I become city clerk, and I will attain that Master Municipal City Clerk Certificate.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one more, because we want to have a little break before the mayoral candidates. So the last question we'll just start with O'Keefe. It's Mr. O'Keefe. If elected for this partial term, do you plan to run again in 2020 for city clerk?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Is that
Oh,
it?
sorry, just yes or no.
Oh, no. Yes, I do.
Ms. Roberts, if elected for this partial term, do you plan to run again in 2020 for city clerk?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis, if elected for this partial term, do you plan to run again in 2020 for city clerk?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Mr. Hagag, if elected for this partial term, do you plan to run again in 2020 for city clerk?
If my crazy ideas don't burn the city hall down, then sure, why not?
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt, if elected for this partial term, do you plan to run again in 2020 for city clerk?
It depends on what the role of city clerk is then.
Thank you. I want to thank all the candidates for coming out and answering all the questions, and thank the audience as well. Give them a round of applause. Sorry, we're gonna give them 1 minute each to close out. I apologize. All right. So, Mr. Hagag, you're gonna go first. Please give us your closing statement.
Again, my name is Hassan Hagag. I would be honored to earn each and every one of your votes and the votes of your friends and family as well. You know, this whole role is about, you know, getting people involved, spreading word of mouth. And the thing about my candidacy is that I just don't talk the talk, but I walk the walk. And I've proven that to each and every one of you over the last several years in the way I've contributed and brought the city closer to each and every one of you in your own homes. And I would continue to do that as your city clerk. I'm the first person in Santa Clara's history to have yard signs that are multilingual. I have them not just in English, but in Spanish, in Hindi, and Chinese. And that is a reflection of my perspective of bringing everybody together. Bringing everybody together. We have people from all walks of life and ages and ethnicities and backgrounds and ambitions living in this city, and we need to cater to everybody. Whether you speak English or not, whether you go to City Hall or not, this city should work for everybody, not just the select few. Again, I'm Hassan Hagag. I'd be honored to earn your vote. And if you want a sign from me, I have some outside.
Thank you. Mr. Stampolis.
Quick on my educational background, since I didn't get to answer that, I'll use part of my time. My undergraduate from Santa Clara U is political science and French. My graduate degrees in pastoral ministry, catechetics. I hold a law degree and half of a master's in public administration. So in addition to my service directly here within the community, I also bring in some of the academics as well. Yeah, it's interesting with Rod, because you mentioned in terms of comparing to what Rod had. When he came in, he also had a partial completion of his master's in public admin. I'll finish that up as well, in addition to getting the certifications from the City Clerks Association. From an old quad perspective, I believe I am the candidate who understands this community better than anybody else who's running. I can be out there to carry the issues that I learned about firsthand during 4 years as one of your representatives on the Historical and Landmarks Commission and 6 years on the Planning Commission. The issues that are facing this community directly need a city clerk who can be an advocate and a liaison to work not just with the community, but also with the planning department and the council to be one of your voices in City Hall. I would be honored to earn your vote and look forward to chatting with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts.
The position of City Clerk really requires someone who is a good leader. It requires someone who is ethical, very ethical, and has a good administrative background. It requires someone who is prepared to reach out to people and to educate the residents of Santa Clara about the role of the City Clerk. The City Clerk job is an important one, and I'd be very happy, and I think I'd be very qualified to serve as City Clerk. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. O'Keefe.
Yes, again, Adam, thank you, and thank the Old Quad Association for putting this on. I think these candidate forums are extremely important. I'm glad the city's finally putting on a citywide forum. As far as the city clerk position goes, I am ready right now to take the job tomorrow. I've had 30 years of public service, and I still wish to serve. I have been in this community a long time. My wife and I are going to remain in this community, and I'm going to work hard for Santa Clara. I hope I've earned your vote. If you want to find more about me, go to O'Keefe.cityclerk.com. Thank you. For those people who have a computer.
Thank you. Mr. McDevitt.
Thank you and everyone else for taking the time to basically listen to us tonight. I appreciate it. In addition to being ethical, a city clerk needs to be impartial. When you're in charge of the elections, you really need to make sure that you don't favor one political party over another. And we haven't really touched upon that today, but that's something that I think is very important. And one thing that when people come up and talk to us, one of the things they say is like, are you a registered Democrat? And really that has nothing to do with what the city clerk does. And so basically being impartial is very important for city clerk. I'd like to say that I'm really sorry that the other candidate wasn't able to come here today, and I think it's fantastic that you have so many people to choose from as to who's going to really help in the elections going forward in Santa Clara. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now we can give them a round of applause. All right, we'll get started. I want to say thank you to the mayoral candidates for coming. We really appreciate it. Real quick, it looks like nobody has cell phones, so thank you for that. I know you guys got the rules already. So just real quick, we're going to do a little different format because there's only two, so we have a little bit more time, a little more questions. We're going to do a 2-minute opening. Each question will allow each candidate to answer. Forget, they can stop and we can move on to the next question. And then we'll have 2 minutes to close out and they can talk about whatever, rebut or anything else like that. So thank you both. Ms. Gilmore is going to go first. With other cities having financial problems, what steps would you take to prevent Santa Clara following the same path? Oh, sorry. Well, you both heard the question. So go ahead, Ms. Gilmore. You can start us off.
Opening statement.
Opening statement.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank the Old Quad Residents Association for hosting this forum tonight. I know that it takes a lot of work. There's a lot of work involved with a candidate forum, so we really appreciate this opportunity. I just wanted to say that I'm proud to be the mayor of Santa Clara in a city that I was born and raised, a city that I'm raising my children in. And I want to continue to do the work that I'm doing now for the city of Santa Clara. In 2016, when our then mayor, Jamie Matthews, resigned suddenly, I was appointed as mayor of Santa Clara. And I have to tell you, at that time, it was really unsettling for me. And I was scared. I was scared because I didn't know why he resigned. He didn't leave me any instructions. He didn't say anything about the reason that he left. And I can tell you that today, I still get that question almost daily as to what happened to him and why did he resign. I don't know at this point, but I do know that since I've been the mayor of Santa Clara for the last 2.5 years, there are a lot of things that I've been working on. I've been working on transparency at City Hall. I've been fighting for engaging our residents. I've been really working on fiscal responsibility. You probably read a lot about me on my fiscal responsibility part, but I've taken it very seriously. As a city council member, I had the job for a few years, and it was a very hard and difficult job as a city council member. When I became mayor, I wasn't really prepared for the absolute enormous amount of work, the issues that Santa Clara is involved in. We're a small city with big, very big issues in this city. And so I have, again, worked in terms of accountability, transparency, fiscal responsibility. Those are the reasons that I'm running for mayor of Santa Clara, and I would hope to continue on with my path as the mayor of Santa Clara and hope that you would support me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
2 minutes goes fast.
Now you know how we feel. Mr. Becker, over the stage.
All right, well, first, thank you to the Old Quad for hosting this forum. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And first off, I am Anthony Becker. I was born here in Santa Clara in 1985 at the Old Kaiser Hospital. I was born, raised, graduated from San Jose State University here as well as De Anza College. So I'm going to start off with, are you tired of when you turn on the television and all you see is nothing but reruns and repeats? Well, you know what? With the status quo, that's all you're going to get. And what I am is I'm a brand new episode and a brand new day here in the city of Santa Clara. And what am I going to do? Well, the number one thing I'm going to do is start providing for real affordable housing for people, because you know what? Santa Clara is getting so unaffordable that it's outrageous. Second, I'm going to focus on our infrastructure. Why? Because we need to focus on the infrastructure before we start building the housing. They've had to build the roads before you built Rome. At the same time, I feel that we need to focus on senior centers and youth. Why? Because those are the two things that have pretty much the same thing in common. Both are usually on fixed incomes, both have a struggle here to live. And the other thing I'm going to do is provide real transparency, real accountability, and I'm going to be working for you. I am not going to dictate from the I'm not going to dictate from the mayor's seat. I am not going to buy council seats, and I'm not going to get a majority block on the council. Why? Because this is democracy. Like I said, I work for you. You are the voice, and that's all I'm here to do. And finally, for the Old Quad, for the issues with the Old Quad, I'm gonna make sure that we have a downtown. Why? Because Santa Clara needs an identity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we'll start with the questions. Ms. Gilmore, with other cities having financial troubles,
Does it go back and forth?
we'll go with you for first question, sorry. With other cities having financial problems, what step would you take to prevent Santa Clara from following the same path?
So, other cities have financial problems. They're not like Santa Clara. Santa Clara is a unique community where we have actually set up the infrastructure in our community so that we can make sure we have enough money in our general fund for the public services and the core services that our city needs. I'm all about accountability, fiscal accountability, and I have been working really hard and fighting to make sure that every single dollar of our public money is spent properly. And so we are going through department by department to make sure that the public funds are accounted for and spent properly. And because of the fiscal management in the city, especially in the last couple of years, we're able to balance our budget, and going forward, we have a financial plan for the next 10 years. We started doing 10-year plans just in the last 2 years. So we're working very carefully, very hard. We have financial experts on staff now to make sure that we have the resources available to provide the high quality of public services for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, with other cities having financial problems, what steps would you take to prevent Santa Clara from following the same path?
Well, the first thing I would look at is we need to stop getting in a bunch of lawsuits, 1. We need to stop having a bunch of deficits, 2. And the last thing I think we need to start focusing on too is providing real opportunities for people here in the city, anywhere from affordable housing to anything of, like I said, a new downtown. But the thing is that I'm really thinking about is if we continue to spend more and more money and we don't have anybody, I mean, look at, we had an audit for the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, this is the second time. This happened in 1992 as well. That was $100,000 we spent then. We're spending $200,000 now. We have a CVRA lawsuit that's probably going to end up costing around almost probably $10 million, the most expensive lawsuit in the history of the CVRA. I mean, it seems like all we're doing is giving out money to people that we shouldn't be giving out money to. We should be spending it here on the citizens of Santa Clara, not the interests of either lawsuits or anything from either hemorrhaging money left and right. So my real goal is that I think instead of auditing either the 49ers constantly, auditing the Chamber of Commerce, you know, we should be auditing the city of Santa Clara. Audit the city of Santa Clara and let's see where all the money's going. Because you know what? We've never had an audit. How about we do it? If we're spending money on audits for all these other things, we should spend it on the audit for the city of Santa Clara. That's real transparency. That's showing where all the money's going. Especially, we shouldn't be spending $700,000 on a new city manager. I mean, what kind of money is that in giving a housing allowance? I don't get a housing allowance, so she should. So our city manager shouldn't either. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, what programs or improvements would you implement to improve traffic within Santa Clara?
Well, traffic is a really major issue. I especially have to deal with traffic often because I have to drive around constantly. It takes me roughly anywhere from probably about 35 minutes or 45 minutes to go from here to downtown San Jose, and that's on the corner of Julian and I believe it is 887. So what I suggest is with traffic is we start working with our neighboring cities to start timing lights better. We start synchronizing our lights better. At the same time, we start developing housing in areas that are not impacted with traffic, like especially on El Camino Real. If we keep building the housing on El Camino Real and some of these other areas that people don't want the housing, it's gonna continue to get worse in the traffic. So let's start doing what Sunnyvale did. And let's start using their model, which they are starting to put housing inside of industrial areas. So I suggest the same thing, like the Lafayette corridor is a really good example where we should start putting our housing. Why? Because it puts traffic into neighborhoods that haven't had it yet. And we could start creating new neighborhoods by putting inclusive things within those neighborhoods, like restaurants, affordable housing, parking, senior housing. That's what we need to focus on providing for traffic, is if we start putting the housing If we put the pretty much what I'm trying to say is, if we put the housing where the jobs are, the traffic's going to start going down. And that's the honest truth. On the planning commission, I'm seeing it more and more, that we just continue to approve things that just don't make sense sometimes, when we need to start putting more input into, this will work in this neighborhood, but it's not going to work on the El Camino Real, especially building, what, 6 stories next door to a 1-story house? It doesn't make sense. That's why the traffic's bad. And the solutions are synchronize the lights and build the housing where the jobs are. That's how you solve the traffic. And work with the neighboring cities, because we can't fix anything alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, what programs or improvements would you implement to improve traffic within Santa Clara?
Thank you. It is a tough question because traffic is a really tough issue. Before, we've always talked about the jobs, housing, and balance in Santa Clara and jobs, housing. Now we have to add traffic to that and transportation. So it should be jobs, housing, and transportation when we look at these projects. We have already done that. About 2 or 3 years ago, we approved a project called Santa Clara Square when I was on the council. And it was a trend-setting project for the area because it's the first time we converted business and industrial land to mixed-use development land. So I use that project as an example because it is the first project that you all may be familiar with. That project has offices, it has some corporate offices, retail, and residential. There's 1,680 units there. And the nice part about this project and the unique part about this project is the first phase of the residential development, the developer, which is the Irvine Company, is going to give first priority to the employees at Erickson. So that leaves the jobs and the housing and the transportation. They can just walk to work. They have a grocery store there. So that particular model is what we're trying to replicate in the specific plan areas we have in North Santa Clara. We have some areas that are specific plans, so we're trying to do these mixed-use projects all over the north area, especially to keep people out of their cars, close to their jobs, but also have them close to retail and other amenities that you need to live, including schools. So the traffic is not an easy situation. We are also working with our surrounding cities and the VTA to come up with some good solutions for us, including the private sector. We have ride sharing and carpooling. We have Scoop that comes and they do it for free for the city, and they're working with some of our businesses now in Santa Clara for ride sharing and carpooling for our businesses. So we're always trying to look with each development and come up with ways to work on transportation demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, what precautions would you take to protect existing single-family residences adjacent to new developments?
Okay, thank you. If you've noticed probably on the El Camino, there's been a pause in development on the El Camino for high-density residential development. And that is really a result of the backlash from higher density projects in neighborhoods where it doesn't work and it doesn't fit. So I have been encouraging developers to work with the residents and the community groups to come up with projects that do fit in neighborhoods, because there's no question that there's a housing shortage and we need density in Santa Clara. But we don't need density in every neighborhood. And I think that's what we have come to realize, is that we don't need density in every neighborhood. And if the developers and the city council would continue to approve these high-density developments, there is going to be an extreme backlash in our community and nothing's going to get built. So I think that developers are getting much more educated by our city council now, that if you want to have your project successful and approved in our community, you really need to work with the residents. And we have some really good examples of developers changing, amending their projects and working with developers, such as the VISO project here in the old quad. I think that was a collaboration with the neighborhood. We had Moonlight Bowling Alley was a high density development, and that was downgraded to some townhomes because of the neighborhood interaction there. I just met with a huge neighborhood group regarding the project on Homestead, because there's a neighborhood backlash on that, and in turn, the developer pulled their project and is amending it based on neighborhood input. So the neighbors have a lot of say in what's happening, and getting projects that fit in the neighborhood is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, what precautions would you take to protect existing single-family residences adjacent to new developments?
Well, first I would just try to let the dust settle for a while and see how everything works out for maybe a couple years, and start focusing on taking all that density housing that we're looking at and start putting it over into the north side, where it really doesn't matter if you start putting high density housing over there. I mean, especially away from the neighborhoods of the existing north side already. I mean, if you drive up in the north side and you go down Tasman and towards Sunnyvale, almost Lawrence Expressway, there's a lot of empty lots. There's a lot of empty lots. And this is a great spot where we can start putting high density housing, because it's going to move it away from the El Camino Real. Because if we keep putting the housing on the El Camino Real or any of these existing neighborhoods or just small, infill projects, it's going to really upset a lot of neighbors. And that's all I've seen when I'm planning commission, is I see the upset nature of people of, oh, we don't want this in our backyard. That it needs a person that's going to be a good compromiser, working with the developers and working with the community. And that's what I want to do, is I want to bring everybody to the table, because that's how we're going to come up with the best project. Where's your Starbucks worker going to live? Where's the grocery store clerk going to live? Where's the person that's going to work at the gas station going to live? We got to take all these things into consideration, because the housing is just so unaffordable. I work 2 jobs. I can't even afford my own place on my own. I have to share with someone. This is the mentality that's happening more and more among the Bay Area, is that people have to live with each other and share with each other. There's no independence when you have to focus on dependency on other people. It's not fair. It's an unjust system. And we need to start working with those developers, or community developers, working with planning commissioners, council, bring everybody to the table. Why? Because everybody deserves a chance to have a roof over their head, deserves to put food on their table. Why? Because that's the American dream. If you don't follow that, you're living a nightmare. And you know what? From being a student, from working 2 jobs, it is so tough, because, think about the gas prices are going higher and higher. How is anyone supposed to make ends meet if everything just keeps going higher, but wages keep staying lower? And then if you keep raising the rents, you keep raising the housing cost of housing, no one's going to make it here. Look at all the young people that you may know, your grandkids, your son, your daughter. Are they priced out? Are you priced out? We need to come together, and we need to find the most appropriate, common sense solutions to affordable housing, because if I'm elected mayor, I'm going to deliver on that. Why? Because I'm going to be a great compromiser, because I'm going to work with everybody. We're going to communicate. You and I are going to communicate. I'm going to be there for you and regularly for you, and I'm going to deliver affordable housing. And if we have to do those little tiny homes and everything, I'll even live there to prove I'm a man of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, how can the city address the need for more affordable housing?
Thank you. Since I've been mayor in the last 2.5 years, even though we didn't have an affordable housing ordinance when I first was appointed mayor, I still fought for affordable housing, voluntary contributions by developers whenever they would come to the council meeting, and I was lucky enough to have support on the city council to have the developers set aside 10% of their projects for affordable housing on a voluntary basis. We are now, I have fought, and our council has fought also, starting August 1st, just this year, we now have an affordable housing ordinance where there's a combination of cash and set-asides of 15% for developers for affordable, and there's different levels of affordability for the different levels. So it's now set in stone in our city, so that should raise our production somewhat. But prior to that, I did fight for it because we need to have an affordable component in all of the projects. And I'm telling you that our developers, they run businesses, and I understand that. But in terms of affordable housing, out of the goodness of their heart, they're not going to provide it to our city. So it's up to the council to make sure that we get that affordable housing. It becomes a condition of development, and that it works for us. So that is our job and our responsibility. Prior to August 1st, we had, I think, 8 or 10 applications in where developers were trying to beat the August 1st deadline for the affordable housing, but we're still going to ask for the voluntary affordable housing, even in the projects that came in ahead of time, because it's the spirit of what's out there, and that's what's good for our community. And anytime we have that, it's important. Prior to coming to this meeting tonight, we had a planning commissioner, Yuki Akizi, who just built an accessory dwelling unit at her home. So she opened it up to the public so that everyone can see her unit, how wonderful it is, and how easy it was to get through the city to get it built. So that's another area that we're working on, is accessory dwelling units on existing single-family homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, would you make any changes to the recently passed historical preservation ordinance? And if so, what would those be?
I think it took us 25 years to get that ordinance, and you're now asking me for changes. I'm fairly happy with the ordinance. I have not been aware of issues coming forward, and that's where I look to our Historical and Landmarks Commission to make recommendations to us. And again, I don't believe that we use our commissions as much as we should. We're trying to do that a little bit more now. In fact, I started a program where we have monthly dinner meetings with each commission on an annual basis, so we can find out what they're doing and how we can help them as council members on their work plans. But I would look to the Historical and Landmarks Commission to make recommendations if they feel that there is areas of that need strengthening, if we need additions to that. I'd absolutely be open. So I know it took many, many, many years to get it. So it's probably always going to be a work in progress. And if there's issues, I'd be completely open to discussing them with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, would you make any changes to the recently passed historical preservation ordinance? And if so, what would those changes be?
Well, I would never make changes to the historical ordinance because I think it's all about preserving our history, because I see our history slowly disappearing here in Santa Clara. Like I said, we keep losing an identity, and I think we started losing an identity back in the 60s during the urban renewal phase when they tore down downtown. We need to start focusing on keeping those our history intact, because if we continue to lose it, what are we going to leave for the next generation to understand and maybe learn from our mistakes or learn from, creating a great future for themselves? That's why on the Planning Commission, I see that you can move things around and keep moving a meeting forward and delaying it if you need more time to talk about it, if you need more time to look at the historical aspect of it. That's why on Planning Commission, I look at a lot of what Historical Landmarks Committee recommends. I look at when I'm on the Architectural Review Committee. I look at the same thing of what the Historical Landmarks Committee recommends. And that is something, like my opponent is saying, is that it's creating more of a conversation with each other and knowing where everybody is. And I think that's a positive. And I think we need to take that a really major step further and make that more communication among each level. I mean, I'm not talking about, almost like what they call ancestral politics, but I'm talking about, keeping things moving and keeping each other in the dialogue, because when I see something torn down that doesn't make sense, that was something historical, what's next? What's next neighborhood that's going to be affected? And that's my plan, is I want to deliver a downtown, and that's the only thing that's going to, I think the only aspect of the historical downtown area that's going to be affected. But I think a lot of people in the old quad do want a downtown because they want something that's going to be inviting and an identity for Santa Clara, and a place that's itself a place. And I think it could be a really good economic economic venue to make more money for our city. But that's pretty much how I feel about that, and I will never take any of the historical buildings down because, like I said, our history is our history, and if we destroy it, we're never going to learn from it.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, how would you work with Santa Clara University to address the concerns of the local neighborhoods about parking and mini dorms?
Well, in the last few years since the last election in 2016, when I was running for city council and I walked this area, we started naming this area as the Red Solo Cup District because of all the fun parties they have out in the front on Friday and Saturday evenings. Well, the thing is that we need to start focusing on maybe keep creating those homes into more family-oriented homes where families can start affording to buy those homes, because we do need the housing, we need places for people to actually buy homes. At the same time, the university, I think we should work with the university on trying to put the housing on campus. And the thing is, I've heard many times about, you can't put a lot of the housing on there because, it's a dry campus, you can't, they're gonna, no alcohol. It's like, really, you think all those kids are gonna follow the rules and pretend they don't have alcohol in their building? Sure, I'll listen to that, But the thing is that I think that we have to focus on keeping the university in their own parameters. Why? Because we keep expanding. Since I was a little boy, for example, the Alameda stopped going through. It continued the university continued to grow. It started taking up more and more blocks. We need to start focusing on keeping Santa Clara within the parameters of building on their own property, especially dorms and housing for the students, because I know they're in need of it. Recently on architectural review, we had the review over the building, which was their new science wing and engineering wing. That is a great building and it works. And that's the thing, is that working with the university to create the right kind of housing, the right affordable housing, and also keeping the neighborhoods inclusive, because I hate hearing the stories of how they have drunk people in their neighborhood or showing up in their yards. I mean, that's got to stop, and that's why I put the housing on the university, because it makes better sense.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, how would you work with the Santa Clara University to address the concerns of the local neighborhood about parking in many dorms?
Thank you. So I've been on the City University Relations Committee for a while, and I think that we've made a lot of progress in terms of working with the university. The city has a good relationship with the university. We meet not as regularly as we should, but we do meet with our police department, our planning department, our code enforcement, which is really important. We had to add code enforcement people. They're not always doing the job we want them to do, but they are still working with us and with the university. The reality is the university has plans to add about 600 units on the campus. It's part of their master plan. They're adding some of those. But when they're freshmen and sophomores, they do live on campus. By the time they're juniors and seniors, they don't want to live on campus. They're not living on campus. They're living in the neighborhood. So we're also looking at other opportunities to develop student housing that's attractive for the upper class people, to get them out of the neighborhoods and in a location. We signed an exclusive negotiating agreement for a property near the train station that's going to be designed specifically for upper class student housing, to try to grab some of the students from the neighborhoods and out. But in terms of the long-term issue, I think in terms of boarding houses and others, we ran across the issue that whatever we do around the university has to be done citywide. And so the fact that the university and the Old Quad area is a very special area, we're looking at an Old Quad overlay zone now that maybe we can address some of these issues in the future in terms of the boarding houses and others that don't affect the rest of the city. So we're working on that. We've had a couple of public hearings. I'm sure some of you have been involved in those. We have a couple more coming up to look at an overlay zone for the Old Quad to address the issues specifically for the Old Quad. But parking and trash and red cups and all those things are our code enforcement and our police department that we have special units now that are around the university. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, what is your vision for rebuilding Santa Clara's downtown?
So I have a unique situation where I'm so interested in the downtown. My great-grandparents immigrated from Spain and started a business in the downtown. It was a clothing business, Navarro Brothers Clothing. They lost their business in the redevelopment. My grandfather did with his brother, and so it was never rebuilt. But we have our office in the downtown in the Franklin Mall that's been there since 1964. So anything close to my business and my building there, I have to abstain. So in terms of the other parts of the downtown, because my office is 500 feet from the back parking lot of the Superior Court building, so I've had to abstain and not participate in any of the downtown discussions for bringing back the streets and which the council has. There's only 4 of us that can talk about it because there's another member who has to abstain as well. But in terms of the rest of the downtown, in terms of the Mission Library, I think that's a really important component of a downtown. We're opening it, in fact, on Saturday at 10 o'clock. Hope to see you all there. That's a very important library. It's almost a community center. We talk about putting placemaking there. We also own the Morse Mansion, in the downtown that we're looking at eventually when we get it in the next couple of years, how we can activate that for the community. And there's other things that I can work on in collaboration with Santa Clara University to make sure that there's a thriving area down there. When it comes close to my building or any of the streets, I absolutely abstain and walk away. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, what is your vision for rebuilding Santa Clara's downtown?
Well, if I had it my way, I'd bulldoze it right now. I say let's start off this way. I think we should start looking at trying to get a ballot measure focused on passing that maybe first as a way to get this area starting to develop. I mean, it would be a perfect way to start going buying up properties, and it would be enforced by the law. At the same time, I would say over here at for an example, this building right across the street here, this giant big one, that one, I think we should start bulldozing that building, rebuild it the same size it is now, and make that a parking garage, and then put some kind of university village right around it. At the same time, then you rebuild the rest of the downtown, put a movie theater where it used to be, and make downtown like it used to be, but more inclusive, with new housing for young people, seniors, and including market housing for people that really are trying to start off on their own. At the same time, I feel that this downtown needs to have everybody involved, including every neighborhood in Santa Clara, just not the old quad, but we're talking every neighborhood in Santa Clara should be a part of this. And I know that Reclaiming Downtown, that group has been focusing on getting a task force together to get everyone from each individual district to start putting input into the design of this downtown, because like I said, Old Quad should be the ones to just decide this, that this needs to be an inclusive and very harmonious relationship on creating a downtown. And the thing is that my opponent said that she can't vote on it, she can't be a part of it, and I do agree she can't because she has to abstain from it. But the thing is that me, if I'm elected mayor, I don't have to abstain from it. I don't have to recuse myself. I don't have to go anywhere. Because why? Because I don't own property. I don't own any of the land around here. I'm a renter. And the thing is I'm going to deliver a downtown because I would have it shovel ready within my first 4 years of office. Because I have never seen a downtown in my life. And my father, before he passed, he used to tell me the great stories that he had down there, including 10 cents to get in the movie theaters. Don't you miss those days? Well, the thing is I'm going to deliver a downtown, and why? Because elected mayor, I'm going to make a difference by creating a place for Santa Clara, not a bunch of issues.
Thank you. I want to remind the audience that we are still taking questions. We're going to be starting the audience questions shortly, so please hand them over to Jonathan and Judy. And please hold reaction. Thank you. Mr. Becker, would you support the Historical Landmarks Commission taking a larger role in the developments within the Old Quad?
Absolutely. I would absolutely want to see them as part of that because I've spoke to a few of the historical landmark commissioners like Nancy Biagini and Spike on there. He really gave me a lot of good insight into what they do on there, and so as well as Nancy Biagini. And the thing is that I would really like to see them more inclusive, more a part of this dialogue with every development that's going on. Because if you look at it, there's some neighborhoods, like for example, we were working on an architectural review thing last night, and one of these neighborhoods was built in the 60s, and it's not a historical neighborhood. But looking at the design of the neighborhood, it to me seems kind of historical because that was the first suburban neighborhoods around. And seeing that kind of aspect of things and how we don't designate these areas, I think that's where Historical Landmark Commission could step it up a little bit more in providing more feedback to planning commission, city council, and we in planning commissioners like myself, like Suds Jane, we take those into consideration and we take them very strongly. And I feel the city council should do the same thing. And as a mayor, I would definitely keep that into consideration because, like I said, these are our historical monuments and these are historical buildings and they need to be preserved because, like I said, if you ruin our history, we don't have any history. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, would you support the Historical Landmarks Commission taking a larger role for all developments within the Old Quad?
Yes, I would. In fact, the Historical Landmarks Commission has really taken a larger role in the last several years. We've relied on them for a lot of information and issues. Santa Clara is a unique city where we have a very traditional, historical, and very honorable past. that we're trying to keep and we're trying to maintain and we're trying to save. At the same time, we call ourselves the center of what's possible. We have the most high-tech, modern area, you know, on one side of town. So I think what I've learned in the past several years is that we're trying to hold on to what we had in the past because that's who we are. That's Santa Clara. And I think that the role of the Historical and Landmarks Commission has become even that much more important in helping us preserve what we have, but also giving us ideas and sort of modernizing the historical nature of some of the ways that we develop now and how we recommend to homeowners to not, you know, maintain their property, improve their property, but still maintain the character of the homes as to what they were. And it's amazing, we have the so many people that are purchasing now, and our neighborhoods are changing a little bit in the Old Quad, and there's a lot of new energy coming in and people that are really wanting to invest and who really want the lifestyle of the beautiful historical homes in the Old Quad area. And so they're energizing it and making it really exciting. So it feels like what's happening down here is just a resurgence of neighborhood. It's a really exciting neighborhood now. And so our Historical Landmarks Commission is busier and they're going to take a greater role, and I would support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, how would you pay for infrastructure improvements and more parks and recreation facilities?
Well, thank you. Since I have been mayor, I've fought, and it was a 4-3 vote for parks fees in Santa Clara. So now our developers pay parks fees to the city, which allows us to buy more parkland and improve our existing parks that we have now. So, and I fought to have that at the highest level, which it is. And so Santa Clara for the last couple of years has generated millions of dollars for our parks. And you're starting to see some of the new parks that we're reopening. We just opened a community gardens and other things. So we are going to continue that. And then that's something that had never happened before in our city. And people fought it. Believe me, the developers fought it and some of our council members fought it. But I was lucky to have a group that made sure that that was important to the city. And it is important to the city. I also was one of the big supporters and fought for Measure R in Santa Clara, which came from our Charter Review Committee. I wrote the ballot statement for that to not only maintain our parks, but to preserve them and make sure that they're never sold or disposed of without a 2/3 vote of the citizens of Santa Clara. And that's really important because the parks that we do have now, we're going to maintain. I forgot the second part of the question. Parks and, infrastructure. So we're looking at an infrastructure bond in Santa Clara. We went out and polled, and it didn't poll very well. So that's why you don't see it on this November ballot. What our residents did tell us, we're okay with looking at fixing infrastructure, our aging pipes, our, under the streets, all those kinds of things. But we want more information. We want more education. So it was very close, so we took the step of stepping back to make sure that any ballot measure that we put out there in terms of infrastructure, because it's in the millions, tens of millions of dollars, that we educate our community as to what they would be voting for. So we're not ready for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, how would you pay for infrastructure improvements and more parks and recreation facilities?
Well, for that, I would probably try to push for a ballot measure. I know that's very expensive and it could be a little dangerous, but at the same time, I mean, is it worth risking not fixing our infrastructure? I mean, take an example. I mean, it must have been 8 years ago now. I think it's been that long. Look at San Bruno where they had the giant gas fire. Yeah, that's PG&E, but it's still a bunch of issues going on with their infrastructure that we need to start focusing on. San Francisco's getting sinkholes. I'm going to San Jose now and I'm starting to smell sewers everywhere. You never used to be able to smell sewers. Go over there by Zanker Road out in San Jose and it smells terrible. You start getting closer to Santa Clara and you start going to some of these neighborhoods now, you're starting to smell the sewers. And that's telling me that we need to start upgrading our infrastructure by working with our developers, because I think our developers should start funding a little bit more money if they're going to start putting these massive developments here, because that's a lot of materials that are going to be going through tinier pipes. they need to upgrade our infrastructure. And by doing that, we're going to focus on trying to get either a ballot measure done or just even try to take it into our budget and focus on that's the key to success. That's how you're going to make people happy, is by fixing our infrastructure. And now when we get to the parks, we had a fee, our park fees used to be the lowest and now they're the highest in I think the Bay Area. And that's the thing that I feel is that we went from one extremity to a very high extremity. But that's a good thing because we need more parks. And I commend my opponent because she was on the Parks and Rec Commission from I think it was 1982, I believe, until 1992. And I commend her for that because she provided great parks for me to play in as a little boy. And that's the thing is that if I'm elected mayor, is I'm going to provide the best quality parks too. And that's the thing that my opponent and I have a lot in common and agree on is that our parks is a place for people to come together. And recently we had the opening at the San Tomas and Moreau Park. Those are the kind of parks that we need to have. Those are inclusive, it gives activities, and it invites people. And I think it's a lot of fun. And I hope to keep working on those kind of projects should I be elected mayor. And I would really be grateful of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, do you feel a community task force should be the driving force for our new downtown, as in the case of other successful U.S. downtowns?
Yes, absolutely yes. And I think I mentioned just a little bit ago. And the thing is, I think it shouldn't just be the old quad making the decisions for the downtown. They are going to be the ones that have to live with it, so they do get a major voice in these decisions. But I do want to see everybody else included on this. I want to see the north side included on this because, yeah, they're going to be getting an uptown pretty soon, but they're going to want to also have a downtown. And I think every single area should be included in their decisions of downtown. I mean, if I look at half the people that are running for office right now, there's a bunch in District 2, and we have District 3, Karen Hardy over here. They all live away from the downtown, but those neighborhoods need to have to be able to be invited into making those decisions. And that's why Reclaiming Downtown, I love their efforts, and I love their plan, and I love their vision because they want to come up with a master plan, and they also want to put have some member from each district or each neighborhood that will make these major decisions for our downtown. And the reason why is because, like I said, we need a place and we need a place of identity. And if I'm elected your mayor, I'm going to deliver that place because I've never got to experience it. A lot of people didn't get to experience it. And I think my opponent didn't get to see downtown as much when she was a little girl. So that's the thing is a lot of people in this room, I don't think got to see downtown. And the ones that did are carrying memories that a lot of us will never be able to share because once they go, the memories go with them. And that's what I want to do is I want to deliver the downtown by putting the best task force together, by making it inclusive, by making it harmonious with everybody, because in order for that to succeed, it's got to have everybody's input. And the thing also I'm going to push for is even a ballot measure for that too, because put it to the people, let the people decide on this, because if we're going to go and spend money on ballot measures, like redoing the district lines, and the district ballot measure again, wasting $90,000 of taxpayer money, that could have been $90,000 more of money we could have spent on a ballot measure to get our downtown built. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, do you feel a community task force should be the driving force for our downtown, for our new downtown, as in the case of other successful U.S. downtowns?
Well, I can talk generally speaking about any big project in a municipality or a city that you're trying to achieve. We do this a lot in the city. We have a marketing committee, which Councilmember Davis is chair of that. If we want to get something done, we sit in the room and we have all the stakeholders involved in getting something done, especially big projects in the city. And it's not just the representation from the entire city as a whole, but you also need the experts and people that help you guide and give you some really good advice on how you achieve your goal. Because you can throw out giant platitudes about getting things done, but if you don't have a financial plan, you know, a development and planning plan, you have to look at ownership, you have to look at, you know, leases. There's so many things that are involved, but if you get the right people in place and you get the right input and buy-in from those stakeholders that are all in the area, and you all know who the stakeholders are around the downtown, then working together, people that are dedicated, because what I've seen in the last couple of years, just from the last street dance in Santa Clara, it was so fun. There's people in our community from all over the community that are looking for something to do. We're all searching for something, a place for us to be and gather and have fun together. So I think there's not a lack of enthusiasm and energy out there. There's a ton of it. It's just channeling it in the right way and taking, getting the right leadership in place to help guide that as well is really important. So I think it can be successful, and certainly everyone's so busy, you don't want to waste people's time, but getting the right people involved can lead to a very successful project and getting the right advice all the way around. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, should Airbnbs be regulated in Santa Clara?
Yes, and we did. Airbnb actually contributes transient occupancy tax for us here in Santa Clara. And we did that prior to the Super Bowl because we thought prior to the Super Bowl that we were going to have our hotels absolutely full. We would be generating all this transient occupancy tax for a couple of weeks. And so we didn't want to miss out on the opportunity for Airbnb because we had read that there was going to be Santa Clara homes were going to go for $10,000 a week and all these types of urban legends. So we did put that in place, and so they do pay transient occupancy tax to the city of Santa Clara. After the Super Bowl, we found that it was very little, but it's still in place now. So that's how we have dealt with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Becker, should Airbnbs be regulated in Santa Clara?
Well, first, I'm really a lot against regulations most of the time, but at this moment, I agree with my opponent that this is something that we do need to take advantage of, especially when we have the Super Bowl here. It continues to be something, especially with concerts, and if we continue to if we expand our entertainment district a little more, and we can start putting better things in there, like I feel maybe like kind of a downtown Disney kind of thing between our stadium and also Great America, to make it more of an inviting area. And that's the thing, is if we have Airbnb, I think it's a good way of making some extra revenues, because people are going to want to come here and stay in Santa Clara. So I do support that fee for Airbnb, and I agree with my opponent on that.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, 1,200 square foot ADUs were approved last year and are too big for many lots. Do you support making ADU square footage tied to the lot ratio, or tied to the lot size for a lot ratio?
Okay. Well, I do support ADUs. I myself, for about 6 years of my life, I lived in a guest house. I lived in 400 square feet, and I made it happen. It was manageable. And I would definitely support ADUs. And what was the second part of that question? It was the ratio?
So it's that we approved up to 1,200 square feet. So would you tie that to a lot size ratio?
Yeah, I probably would. I mean, when I had the 400 square foot guest house, we were told, at that time, guest houses were banned. I mean, no one was allowed to have an ADU back then. Because before that, you were allowed to actually build a guest house, and we were actually grandfather claused in. And suddenly now, because of the housing shortage, we now do have an ADU ordinance. And that's the thing, is that I want to see more of those, because I think that's a better way of cutting down on the housing needs. But with the ratio, I would support that, because when we had my guest house, we couldn't go so far from the fence, we couldn't go so far over here from this side of the fence, and we couldn't go so far from the front of the house. And I agree with that, because I think we don't want to end up having just nothing but house on a whole property. We do want to kind of have some yard in there too. And I've seen some of the new ADUs, and I think they're really well done. And it makes it look like it's not even an ADU, it makes it look like it's still part of the house. And it's separate residence. And I see more of that happening here. I see a lot of that happening over in Mountain View and Sunnyvale, and I think it's a really popular idea right now, and I'd really support more of that.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, 1,200 square foot ADUs were approved last year and is too big for many lots. Do you support making ADU square footage tied to lot ratio?
I think it's up to 1,200 square feet, and I thought it was ordinance and law. But what's interesting is that ADUs, we actually had a study session on the ADUs when we were looking at, knowing that this was coming forward and that we were going to be propelled to approve these ADUs over the counter and make it easy for homeowners to have them. What we found was that, and we're still looking for ways for the city to get involved and help with some of the financing for some of our homeowners. Especially, we have so many homeowners that are maybe elderly, that are the only occupant of their larger home, that are looking for ways to generate income and also help our workforce in terms of providing lower rent and in many cases companionship. And the reason I'm saying that, I just again left Yuki Akizi's house that she opened to the public, her ADU. Hers was attached, which made the lot size, she still has a pretty decent lot size, and I've seen those that are detached. So I think if we have the opportunity and the flexibility to do that, then I would support that, because not all lots are big. We have small lots, but yet still people want the opportunity to develop an ADU on their property. So we should be able to have as much flexibility for them as possible, knowing that there's a housing crisis, and this is a way that helps our existing homeowners as well as workforce housing in the city of Santa Clara.
Okay, last question of this evening. Ms. Gilmore, if elected mayor, what are your 3 goals that were not discussed tonight?
The first goal that I have that I'm working really hard on is transparency in City Hall. And so one of the things that is really important to me was we had we had the State of the City addresses, where in the past, the mayor would go to the Chamber of Commerce, meet with business people, and give the state of the city to the business community. Well, I changed that this year, and I went out to 4 areas of the community at different days and different times, and I delivered a state of the city, talking about where we are financially, where we are as a city, what my goals were and my council's goals were moving forward. I also stayed afterwards and I answered questions from the audience, any question, anytime, with as many people as possible. So we had quite a few people that came, but I saw that in the future, it'll even get bigger. So I want to make sure that that happens, the transparency continues, and people know what's going on at City Hall. My second responsibility, and where I'm working really hard on, is fiscal responsibility for the city. Unlike my opponent who talked about an audit in '92 that never happened, I am working hard to make sure that every public dollar is spent responsibly in the city, and every public dollar is accounted for. So whether that includes audits, whether it includes calling the Chamber of Commerce for their spending of money, whether it includes getting the rent reset for the 49ers to make sure that they're paying their fair share so we're not stuck with a stadium that we have to pay for like Oakland does. I'm going to make sure that the city of Santa Clara is fiscally responsible. And the third and last thing is that we're changing in terms of our development here. I want to make sure we progress in the city, but at the same time maintain our hometown nature here in Santa Clara. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Becker, if elected mayor, what are your 3 goals that were not discussed tonight?
Well, the first would probably be Levi Stadium, and that would be, my opponent sits here and talks about that we had a victory with a 1% victory for the arbitration. 1% is nothing. We could have got up to 10%. And the thing is that my opponent sits here and talks about a lot about the transparency, and I feel that is something that we're lacking in the city. And that is one of the number one things that I'm going to focus on is real transparency and accountability. And why is because my opponent signed the deals for the 49ers. She knocked at my door, she knocked at probably all of your doors and told you to vote yes on Measure J. She is accountable for that Measure J. And the thing is that's not real transparency when she sits here and says that, oh, I'm fighting for the stadium, I'm fighting for everything, and I'm fighting for the people. You invited the stadium here, and now we have to work with it. And the thing is that me, if I'm elected mayor, is I'm gonna work with that stadium. Why? Because it's a better opportunity for us to work with it. Because a lot of people here didn't like it, but now we have to deal with it. Okay, and the thing is I'm gonna provide the best transparency with that deal because I'm gonna make sure that Measure J is followed, make sure the law is followed. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work with the north side. And if I do have the opportunity to be elected mayor, I'd like to work with council member Kathy Watanabe on the north side to go and come up with a task force, a community patrol, kind of like the Castro Community Patrol, on how they can help with the north side issues after the stadium events, from concerts to any of the football games, to keep people from, doing bad things in neighborhoods. At the same time, I think another issue I'd like to speak about is an education thing, is I see a lot of young people, and when they're getting out of school, they want better opportunities to make some real money. And the thing is that you can't always just jump into college immediately. You can do it, but you need a job. And I think we should start giving training to young people, kind of like what San Jose is doing, is providing the apprenticeships in plumbing, electricians, because we're losing those jobs left and right, and we're seeing nothing but engineers. We didn't run out of, like in the movie Interstellar, we didn't run out of TVs, we didn't run out of any phones or anything like that. We're running out of skilled positions that are that are going to benefit the people of the Santa Clara.
Thank you. All right, now we'll allow you guys each 2 minutes to close up. Your last thoughts, Mr. Becker?
All right, well, if I'm elected your mayor, I'm going to make it a real transparent position as your mayor. I have no ownership over anything. I won't be having to abstain and constantly recuse myself from anything, from any business transactions, because I don't have any business like that. I'm going to be a person of the people. I'm going to provide the real answers to major issues here. I'm going to deliver on a downtown. I'm going to assure that our stadium is going to be working properly and assure that Measure J is followed. Because like I said, my opponent signed the deals. You don't believe me? You don't believe what I'm having to say? Go to my website, www.beckerformayor2018.com, and check out my videos. I released a video today that exposes that my opponent signed the deals and has continued to be a corporate shill in this city. And the thing is that we need somebody that is going to stand up for the people in this city and continue to provide the best environment for people of the city of Santa Clara. And what am I going to do? Is I'm going to make this city the place that everybody wants to be a part of. Because I continue to see people leave here left and right because it's unaffordable. And that's another thing. I'm going to provide affordable housing, and I'm going to provide a place for people to go to, which is our downtown. And I ask for your vote on November 6th because this is a moment in history where we can actually elect somebody new for the first time in 35 years. That's older than me. My opponent has been in office for 16 total years. I am 33 years old. It is time for change. It is time for new blood. And it is time to put Santa Clara back on the right track. And to close up on that and the audit issue, she said there was no audit. She did audit the chamber back in 1993 and spent $100,000 of taxpayer money with Eddie Souza and Jim Ash. If you don't believe me, like I said, go to my website. All the proof is on my website. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the Old Quad for having this tonight. And once again, I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Gilmore, closing statements.
Thank you very much. I want to continue as mayor of Santa Clara. I think that I've done a lot of work in fighting for the city of Santa Clara. In terms of quality of life, I have encouraged and supported developers to have development-friendly, neighborhood-friendly developments in our city. You will now see developers pay more for parks and schools than you did before. And I want to make sure that the neighborhood and the quality of life in the neighborhood, especially around Levi Stadium, that the neighbors are protected and to make sure that they are able to enjoy their quality of life. And that is more important to me than any minimal revenues we may get. In terms of fiscal responsibility, last year, the city of Santa Clara, we put away $70 million into our reserves in the city of Santa Clara to make up for the depleted reserves that took place during the Great Recession. So we worked hard to do that because fiscal responsibility is one of my top items. I also made sure that no general fund money was used to operate the stadium, which when I became mayor, it was. It was used, and a lot of it, and I stopped that. I also worked to save, fight against special interests to save our youth soccer park in Santa Clara from being sold for pennies on the dollar by members of our council. Also, the reuse of Eula Stack Natural Area, which was going to be the new soccer park in the plan. I stopped that and worked with the community to make sure that our assets are protected. I also interested in transparency. It's very important. In the last election, we had an anonymous group that was trying to fund campaigns for city council to staff the city council. They started a dark money group, which you don't know who is behind that. We stopped that and started the first dark money ordinance in the city of Santa Clara and the first in the nation. So I'm working hard, and I hope that you will return me to the seat, and thank you very much, and thank you for this evening.
Thank you. I want to give a very appreciation for both candidates to come and spend time with us and answer all of our questions. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Again, I also want to thank our partner, the Mission City Credit Union, for helping co-sponsoring this, as well as the Legion Hall. Also, on September 29th, we are going to have Franklin Street Festival that we are co-sponsoring with the university. It is open to the public and the students. So we'd like to see you guys all there. Again, September 29th, 1 to 5. Thank you.